Uplift, educate, empower.
Howdy, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy here with this week's episode of Wise Content Creates Wealth. You heard that content is king. Well, wise content rules the world. Wise content requires analysis and use of data to inform decisions about what to create and how to promote it. Using knowledge and tools such as behavioral science, artificial intelligence, semantic research, and other kinds of opportunities and tools, we explore this space for how you can use wise content to help build your success. As I mentioned, I am Joseph Franklin McElroy, and I am a marketing technology expert who has built a multi-million-dollar company, created award-winning technology, and successfully implemented viral content campaigns. Today, we're going to talk about SEO and content with an expert in the field. But first, I'm going to give you a little history lesson about viral content. In 2001, a man named Judson Lapley performed Evolution of Dance to assist in his motivational speaking gigs. It consisted of 12 popular dance songs of the late 20th century. In the video, he is seen performing various dance moves on stage with a spotlight pointing at him and sounds of audience cheering and clapping in the background. It's not a very professionally produced video, but it was extremely popular. 3 years later, he uploaded that video, which was about 6 minutes in length, to YouTube. And after posting the video, he left for a weekend retreat without any cell or internet service. And upon returning home, he discovered he was one of the first people to have become a viral internet sensation. The clip received 70 million views in under 8 months. At that time, it was rated on YouTube as the #1 most viewed all-time video on YouTube. It was the #1 top rated video on YouTube, and it was #3 most discussed video on YouTube. In Judson's words, he experienced, and this is critical when you talk about wise content, he experienced a rocket boost of 10 to 15 years of acceleration from the exposure standpoint. You imagine jumping your career 15 years ahead as a result of this Evolution of Dance video. He's been the only person ever to be a guest on both Oprah and Tosh.0 or Dosh.0, which I don't know which one it was. He's also appeared in music videos with both Bare Naked Ladies and Weezers and many other cultural phenomenons, but he has a successful business to this day. But viral doesn't necessarily mean success. And Justin explained this as well in an interview, that the only reason he was able to leverage his 15 minutes for fame so successfully was due to the many years of hard work in his chosen field he'd already done. He was prepared for that success. A lot of people have gone viral and then you don't hear anything about them after a few years. Viral can be a poison pill in some ways. Viral can actually, people that have been viral success and then try to leverage it without really having a background to leverage it can often become something of a laughing stock or a joke. So you have to be careful. When we're talking about doing content marketing and SEO, you sometimes want to think about a viral effect, but you have to be careful about a viral effect in SEO. So if one of the things in SEO, when you do a piece of content that you put out there and gets a lot of links, a massive amount of links to a single page, you might think that's great for SEO, but it's not always the truth. It's not always this case. It's often the case that it has no effect on SEO or actually can be detrimental to SEO. And it's because a lot of times the content that was produced is not relevant to the rest of the site. It's not relevant to what you're doing. You get a lot of keyword success and keywords that have no relevancy to your business. So what do? You want to make sure that the page that's getting linked to is not particularly off topic. And you want to make, you want to have them to be, the content to be very relevant, but interesting in what you're doing. Now, you also have to deal with, when you're doing viral content, you have to think about the title, because the title, a lot of ways, is important for why it goes viral. So sometimes you can't even have the keywords in there, but you try to want to make them not so far off what you are doing that you get a lot of links and things that are just totally irrelevant to your business. So planning and preparation is important when you get into doing things virally. Now, a man who knows a lot about this sort of thing, he taught me about ego baiting, is Hussein Ebied. Hussein is the CEO and founder of Sunnyside Digital, a performance marketing agency that leverages content and user experience to supercharge search marketing for their clients. Hussein has over 15 years of agency experience working with some of the top digital agencies across America, including 360i, Pacific, Galileo Tech Media, which is my company, and Acronym Media. He has led SEO and content strategy for several Fortune 500 companies, including the likes of Expedia, Travelocity, Bauer, CarRentals.com, Mint, and Jacuzzi. Outside of marketing, Jose is a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces and a proud father of 2 young. How are you doing, Hussein?
Great. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm really excited.
Sure. I'm very happy to have. We haven't had a conversation in a while. I'm glad we get to have this conversation.
It's been a while, yeah.
So I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you also mentioned your bio. You were in the U.S. Army, and then that was followed by being a news assistant at CNN, and then you got into SEO. How did you get that kind of a career trajectory?
It's really funny. It was, I can't say it was actually planned. I was always very ambitious as a younger man, and initially the idea of being in some sort of media always excited me. Initially, I was thinking more along the lines of traditional, hence the internship at CNN. But then when I moved to New York, I grew up in New York. When I moved back after college, I sort of fell backwards into digital marketing, and I didn't realize it at the time, but a lot of experiences I had in my life up to that point sort of prepared me for this industry in ways that I never really thought of or expected. But I'm really glad that, my destiny led me there.
Cool. What did you learn in the Army and then later as a news assistant at CNN that helps your career now?
I think many of the reasons why I ended up in marketing is I just had a really, unique and interesting upbringing. I grew up in New York City, but there are certain aspects of my identity that sort of put me into unique situations. For example, I'm originally, my ethnic background is I'm Egyptian. I'm also a practicing Muslim. And while I was in the military, while I was in college, even when I was at CNN, so many times I was put in situations where I had to sort of understand people's perceptions of me and what they might be, so that I could then figure out what the best way for me is to convey sort of my identity, my principles, my values in a way that they will find accessible and not intimidating. And I think forcing yourself to always empathize with those around you by taking into consideration their beliefs and their experiences helped me become a better marketer. It sort of helped me strengthen that part where you have to know your audience and you have to know what information or understanding they might have about a given topic so that you can form the best strategy to convey your own message to them.
Cool. So what was your first SEO experience?
That's a really good question. I think I was an SEO coordinator at Acronym Media. I remember what I really appreciated about that agency is they took me in with no prior SEO knowledge or digital marketing I remember going into the interview thinking, okay, they work with Google and Yahoo, but I'm not really sure what that means. I thought that maybe I had to know some HTML or something. And I remember picking a book the day before the interview, just hoping that they'll ask me simple questions about the basic building blocks of HTML, but they never did.
Mm-hmm.
What they did is they understood right off the bat that I didn't really know what they did. And at the time they said, we're going to let you sit with different heads of departments. They will explain to you what paid media is, what analytics is, what SEO is, and then you could sort of tell us what you find most appealing to you. SEO, it was a no-brainer. Once I started hearing about how it works and what goes into it, what I liked about it is that the person who described it to me told me SEO is about putting your hands into every aspect of a marketing channel in order to sort of do it right. And the first client I worked on was an organization called the Conference Board. And I remember this was an interesting organization that was responsible for putting out reports about consumer confidence in the markets. And it was so strange because I knew nothing about what that client actually did. And I just remember I need to learn more about what this client actually does in order for me to be able to serve them. And that was sort of the first lesson I learned, which is you have to know your clients as well as they understand their own business. And then you have to try to understand who their audiences are.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about marketing is that you actually have to understand, how a business operates to some extent, but with SEO especially, because you're trying to get content in all phases of the buying process, from investigation all the way to after the fact when they're satisfied. You really sort of have to understand the whole business, right?
You have to be an expert in their domain, exactly.
Yeah. So it's and I one of the things I recommend to people, companies out there is you actually want to get somebody that's an SEO that has experience in your domain, right? Otherwise, there's definitely going to be a learning curve. Now, not to say that somebody's really great at SEO and you can't bring them in, and all the aspects of doing SEO can greatly benefit your organization. But if you're wanting to get the quickest and fastest results from SEO that you maybe can, you want somebody that has expertise in that niche, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, no, and in fact, one of the things I like to do when the circumstances allow it is before starting an SEO program, I like to see how many hours I could spend with a client where all they do is just talk to me about their industry, the history of the business, how does it work, when do people buy your product or service? Because the more I can understand more I know what they know, the better I will be at developing strategies and recommendations that will help engage their target audiences.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if the SEO doesn't do a discovery that's pretty extensive up front, they're probably not going to do well for you. Exactly. So we have to take a break and come back. We'll finish investigating your background, then we'll get into some current stuff. All right.
Very cool.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Howdy, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast and my guest, Hussein Ebied. So Hussein, I have a friend of mine that was a previous guest on this podcast was Mike Gearham, who was with the Acronym, right?
I was there when he joined.
Yeah, well, he did you hear he just left? He's gone to a big job out on the West Coast. Yeah, so yeah, I thought you might know him. Yeah. So after Acronym, where did you go?
So after Acronym Media, I took a role on more of the client services side at a company called TMP Directional Marketing. At the time, they were the largest print advertising company for a lot of traditional advertisers who were still working with, think about like national buys into yellow pages and super pages, but they were really developing and growing their digital arm. So I kind of came in to support that. And while I was there, I got to work on some really nice accounts, but it also gave me an opportunity as an account executive to improve my literacy with all other aspects of digital marketing, since I was sort of responsible for managing the client relationship across paid media, social media, and that's where I really got a chance to better understand how the larger ecosystem of marketing.
How did that? So you got to see the transition from print advertising, to digital advertising, right?
Yeah, it was really interesting because these were clients that were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in getting into print mailers and yellow pages all across the country. And those same advertisers, like the yellow pages and the super pages at the time, they were doing everything they can to go digital as well. And my job was try to help them sell this sort of new product to many of their national companies. And it was a really interesting time to see. It was volatile, it was changing really fast, and people were questioning everything in relation to print. And so, but yeah, no, it was a great experience. And I got to sort of see firsthand, you're right, sort of the increasing importance of digital in large company sort of media mixes.
In those days, print was there the idea of viral? I mean, I guess there was, the idea of publishing and the number of sales or whatever, but was there an idea of virality or something like that?
No, I got to say it was really all focused on direct response and increasing sales and revenue. And I think that's also what made, for many companies, digital a very difficult transition because, as you know, with digital, obviously direct response generating leads and revenue is a core component of it. But clients and companies, for the first time in their marketing, had to start thinking about going beyond that and delivering a greater currency than just an ad, but rather an experience. This idea of building content that's designed to not only sell, but to inform and inspire. And that was new. And I think that was the most difficult part of that transition for them.
And would you say that when it was all about print, it was about copywriting, and copywriting was about how triggering emotional responses, right?
Right. In the shortest words possible.
In the shortest words possible. And there wasn't the analytics and the data to analyze the science of it, the position, all that sort of stuff.
Right. You kind of just paid for the number of impressions that you would hopefully get.
Yeah. And after that gig, you went to Pacific, is that right?
Well, it was actually another agency where I went back to my roots as an SEO. The company was called Stake Digital, and it was acquired by the Dentsu agency, which is one of the top 5
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Dentsu then merged us and me with it with 360i, which was one of the companies they own.
Oh wow, cool. Yeah. Back in the day that they got interested in the digital, I did a .com, and they actually flew me out to Japan, all right, to present my .com idea to SoftBank and some and Mitsubishi and things like that. And then,
Wow.
made,
Did they
made
take
some-
you to the
made some-
mountain?
Well, I had an offer sheet from SoftBank, and then and Mitsubishi was going to do it, but then April 14th happened in the internet space of the first .com era, which is when the stock market.
Bad timing, right?
Bad timing, right? But a couple months after 9/11, Mitsubishi actually reached back out and was interested in continuing, but I was no longer with my .com because I'd taken exit because I had been at 9/11 and I needed a break. So, but anyway, and then you ended up at Pacific, right?
Yeah. So one of my close colleagues, and he was actually my director over at 360i. He went and started his own sort of full service digital agency out in San Diego, and a couple of years into it, he courted me to head up his SEO department and team that was growing fast out in San Diego.
They become a pretty big firm. Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised because most agencies, even the really large ones like the 360is, you would expect that they might have an army of SEOs, but no, most SEO teams are pretty lean.
Mm-hmm.
But at Pacific, because they had clients like Expedia and Travelocity that had major SEO, demand, that team grew really fast. I think I joined when the team was maybe about 6 to 8 people, and within the course of the first 6 months I was there, I saw it grow to about 15 people. And as far as SEO agencies go, that is a large SEO team.
Yeah, that's definitely for an agency. Yeah. So is that where you had like Travelocity and Expedia as clients?
Yeah, and that's where also it was sort of my work with the CEO of Pacific Digital. His name is Norman Bronze. That's sort of where we began fostering this idea of experiential marketing being a core pillar to SEO.
Mm-hmm.
Almost the whole time I was there, we were always trying to sell this idea to many of the clients that we had at the time. But one of the things that we did run into oftentimes, especially when dealing with really large enterprise clients, is it's hard for them to adopt that philosophy of SEO being sort of married to the experience, to brand, to content strategy. It's actually one of the reasons I almost prefer now to work with smaller to medium-sized businesses, because not everything is so sacred. When you go to a client like a large Fortune 500 and you tell them, hey, to do SEO right, we'd like to put some ideas out of how to transform certain landing pages.
Right.
And for them, it's like, no, we thought, you guys would come and maybe just optimize what we already have.
Yeah.
So they always try to.
I get it. I've had Marriott do their content, but then I have my own small resort in the mountains where I could do the content, right? And I have become an expert in something called memorable tourism experiences, which I've implemented into.
You've told me about that. Yeah.
Into SEO, and I've tripled the revenue of this little place in a couple of years.
Wow.
Right. Just going into making the experience part of the content, and the thing is that what they've found about experience, which I think you probably know, is that anticipation makes the experience more intense.
Yes.
And that's where marketing fits, is the anticipation.
Yeah, that's
right?
that's so perfectly said. I mean, it's exactly what we try to explain is like, for example, I have an education client. It's like a private college, and it's, their focus may be that sort of conversion where a prospective student will enroll. But similar to memorable tourist experiences, it's like we had to sort of sell this idea that Well, before someone decides they want to enroll, there's a lot of things that happen in the emotional process for a person before they ever decide to do that. And in the case of education, it's the aspiration of changing your life. What could an education, do for my future? What are the careers that are out there? How can I increase my salary and the income that I'm making and bringing home every day? And so it's almost like if you don't address those parts of it, then you're going to limit the number of people that will eventually come and enter your conversion funnel and enroll and so on and so forth. And it's the same thing with travel, to your point.
Cool. Well, travel, where we first really started talking was about travel SEO. And you taught me about something called ego baiting, and that you did for a couple clients. Could you explain that again, just for the audience? I loved it. And I've used it. Yeah.
Well, it's funny because it all sort of stemmed so many things that so many of the ways I look at SEO and the world of marketing usually stems from a break away from the old way of doing things. And this idea of ego baiting or developing digital PR content really came from the fact that at one point, pretty much after the Penguin update, for all the SEO listeners out there, link building became a very hazardous practice. And some of those really large clients that we worked with, they were starting to get dinged for questionable gray hat link building practices.
And it's very problematic to do link building. So yeah. Exactly.
And I actually like to tell people, like, you want to do SEO link building, don't hire an SEO to do it for you. Just don't.
Yeah, right.
And that's what happened. One of our largest clients, they got dinged. Thankfully, not to anything that we had done, but these large companies will work with multiple vendors, and that large client, it was a day where they basically got removed from Google's index. And this is a large multinational global company, and their market cap, I heard rumors, went down by like $1 billion overnight.
Well, we have to take a break now. Sorry about that. And then we'll come back and you'll tell us how you solved it with this ego baiting. All right.
Sounds good.
Host of the new podcast, Gateway to the Smokies. It airs on talkradio.nyc every Tuesday night from 6 p.m. to 7. Every episode is dedicated to memorable experiences in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and surrounding areas. This show features experts and locals who will expound upon the richness of culture, history, and adventure that awaits you in the Smokies. Tune in every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 7 on talkradio.nyc.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law business law attorney and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc, now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hi, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy, back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast with my guest, Hussein Ebied. So Hussein, we were talking about a company losing $1 billion market cap because of link building and how you solved that problem with ego baiting. Finish that up.
Yeah, totally. So, and it also goes to show you the power that Google has, right? The day they decide to remove you from their index. But well, the first thing we had to do was get them back in Google's good graces. And so think large disavow files. We even went sort of like even links that were questionable, that weren't necessarily bad or toxic. We even disavowed those. We had to do everything we could to just get back, in the playing field. But then the client themselves were wise enough to say, well, we know we can't stop building links. We know that our competitors are doing it. And if we stop doing it, we're going to be sort of left in the dust. So how do we do this right? And so at the time, our agency said, okay, well, how do we do it the right way? How do we do it the way Google has always recommended for brands to develop links naturally over time? And the answer was always right in front of us, but most SEOs just, were too lazy to actually do it. And it's costly, right? Like, it's so much easier to pay some link vendor a few $100 to get you a, rank 10 link or something. So we decided, let's develop a team. And it was in this meeting that, the client and the agency agreed on what this team should be made out of. It was agreed upon that it won't be a team of SEOs, that the SEOs could always work with that team to sort of offer them their thinking and their experience. But this team would be made up of people with previous journalistic experience, PR experience, understanding of how to create connections with publishers, influencers, local media outlets. And their job is to develop content that will naturally engage and excite and interest all of these various publishers and outlets. And in the beginning, it was sort of a rocky start. It's like, well, what type of content can do that, especially when it's sort of coming from a brand?
Right.
And at one point they realized, the brand that they were trying to do this for was large enough where, hey, why don't we just start putting out these sort of listicles and pieces that seem to honor or pay credence to various towns across the country or around the world, various accommodations, hotels, resorts, and start putting them, sort of honoring them in these types of lists about the most romantic places to spend your honeymoon, the friendliest towns in Canada. You always start thinking about the demographic of the place and think, well, what would they be proud of? And Canadians are proud to be considered, the hosts of the friendliest towns. And
right.
And it's amazing, the kind of success we saw from it. We weren't just getting links then from the local tourism boards or from the resorts and hotels themselves. We realized that when we actually put a spotlight on smaller towns who maybe have not gotten the attention they've deserved for years, we would get things like the local mayor would talk about being mentioned on our client's blog. Local TV and radio, it would be in their morning segment. Guess what, folks? Our town has been named one of the top 10, and so we were getting links, but more importantly, we were getting buzz. It was sort of an SEO, a traditional SEO agency was delivering things that the brand teams at that client were like scratching their heads and like, how are you doing this? And look, at times, like I said, with large companies, if they have a large brand or PR team, you could naturally find these sort of moments where you conflict with what you want to do versus what they're doing, but it's the right way to do it. Yeah. Don't have an SEO try to build links for you.
I loved it. I love it. One of the things I did once you told me about that, understanding that, that sort of, baiting people's egos. I started using help a reporter out, right?
Right.
And I would do a push out a request for, what's the best way to do SEO during the pandemic? Right. Or is what is the best way to, do SEO for the steamboat site? And I would put it out there, and all these SEOs would give me quotes, right? And then I would put an article on my website, right? That listed the quotes by the best quotes by these SEOs, right? And then they would all invariably link to the page, right? Yeah. And mention it in social media. And that's one of the reasons to this day Galileo is usually in the top 1 or 2 for travel SEO and travel SEO related keywords, right?
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. That is so cool. That is very cool.
And do it for clients. So that was a good idea. So
Yeah.
you started Sunnyside Digital, and I'm assuming that you talked about experiential SEO, and that's probably your that's what you're hanging your hat on.
Yeah. I mean, that is my shtick, basically. I wanted to start Sunnyside to start delivering this philosophy to maybe smaller clients or companies that are growing, especially ones who, if they adopted the idea, it would be a lot easier, again, to sort of have a say in everything from obviously their SEO, but also their content, their brand, their experience. This idea that, you know, the way I like to explain it to most clients is like, over the years, Google keeps putting out these large updates. There's Panda, there's Penguin, and whenever a new update comes out and it's verified by Google, you know, the world goes crazy and marketers start, you know, scrambling to do that one thing that Google has mentioned. Hey, we might care about this. We might care about expertise, authority, and trust. All of a sudden, everybody's thinking about things like authorship and so my thinking is, let's stop doing that. Let's stop paying attention to every algorithmic update. Let's look at where this is headed. And at the end of the day, what Google wants is for us to create great experiences for audiences.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that if you're selling a product or service, you may want to have a couple of testimonials on that landing page.
Right.
You may want to have some frequently asked questions. You may want to have something that will indicate that you are an expert and an authority in your space. And some clients, you know, it scares them that all of a sudden they hired an SEO agency that's telling them that we don't want to just optimize your titles and headings. We actually want to offer you a completely new landing page experience that maybe you weren't even planning on developing. So
wow, that's, I mean, and I guess your clients, how do your prospects, I mean, you're responded well to this. How do your prospects in general respond to this?
sometimes they're all for it. Sometimes they're like, take the keys to the castle, show us what you want to build, and we go straight to, all right, let's we're going to do some research and we're going to wireframe what your product page should look like, what your feature pages should look like, things like that. Sometimes they're like, can we do it? Can we take it step by step? And I'll be like, sure, let's build in some of these new things as like new sections to the pages that already exist on your website. Let's create a few articles to show that, at least to prove out whether or not this type of content could engage before we go and develop an entire content hub on your site. Let's just post a few articles and see what happens. And so sometimes it takes time for companies. Again, it's almost like if you hire a brand strategist, you have to know, you're getting, nothing should be sacred. You would hire a brand strategist because they might come in with some really bold ideas. When you're hiring us for SEO, you have to sort of be prepared for that as well.
What do you tell a prospect that wants immediate results?
For immediate results, I tell them that I usually tell them right away, this isn't going to be it. The best thing you could really do is let us work with your paid media practice, or let us run your paid media for you. And maybe the scope of SEO and content will be anything that could further support your paid media. So a lot of companies, we will educate them on the fact that you could spend less money in paid search if you have more relevant and meaningful content experiences at the end of those ads. So we could always come in and sort of support or manage their paid search and paid media. Oftentimes, if we do that first, we could develop their trust that we have their best interests in mind. Because again, my type of SEO is a hard pill to swallow. You're not just hiring me for keyword research and title tag optimizations. No, I want to do wireframes for you. And I want to hire copywriters to build fresh new content for you and do so on an ongoing basis. So that's a big investment for many companies, that especially ones who've never done SEO before.
Well, the thing that strikes me is you and I both have done also SEO for large travel companies,
right?
And large real estate companies, and they, as you know, they're still caught up in the world of optimizing all the title tags and the meta descriptions and blah blah blah. What would you tell a company that's built all their processes and all their internal SEOs and everything else to do this, what would you tell them about how to make a change from that and go into a direction that's more about this?
Well, with those types of companies, the really large ones, it's the reality is it does take time. You have to almost focus on building the right relationships and sort of bridging gaps with that client, because oftentimes a really large company, they'll have an entire group of people that are where their job is to manage SEO and SEO vendors. And internally, they have no connections with their own brand, with their own content or PR folks. So one of the things we'll do is we'll work with them to find out how can we help you form closer relationships with your own internal teams. And we try to work with them and find a way like, hey, we have an idea, but instead of just sending it in an email, we'll try to create a visual of it. Maybe we could get someone on their end to start looking at what we're trying to do and champion the idea. But it's actually amazing how much time has to go into relationship building when it's a really large client.
So this is, I think your approach is really dependent upon having really good copywriting, right? I mean, it's got to have, there's got to be a lot of professional knowledge of how to influence people to, and have specialty stuff like in my space, the memorable tourism experience. You have to have people trained in doing that. So, you got an SEO strategist. What is he going to do to adopt your approach? Then how are they going to work with the copywriter to make this work?
Yeah, so that's always a really tricky prospect. One of the things that what I'll do is with the SEOs on our team is I always constantly remind them that you have to take yourself out of this mindset where you are the quote unquote SEO. You have to start thinking like a content strategist. Take an idea you have. I want you to draw it out for me. Oh, I've never illustrated anything before. Use Canva. Show me what your thinking looks like. And then when they do a handoff to a copywriter, for the longest time, many SEOs will put together a small group of keywords and just sort of give them a general topic and just hope and pray that the writer will know what to do with that. We reject that. When we hand over a brief to a writer, we try to give them as many tools they can utilize as possible. Yes, we have the keywords, but we always put a little disclaimer, hey, these keywords are optional. What's more important for us is that you address all the various, that you provide a large breadth and depth of content to a given topic. So I always challenge my SEOs to look up the most, relevant questions that you want the writer to answer in the piece. Sometimes I push them to even structure the article or the content in the way that they imagine it, that will help them sort of exceed all the competition. So build out the sections, build out the heading structures. For each heading, tell them exactly what you want in each paragraph. Give the writer all the tools that will help them deliver a piece of content that will essentially, dominate in the competitive landscape for that given topic.
Cool. Well, we have to take a break, and then we'll come back, finish up with more about the help working with copy, and then some shout outs.
Yep.
Join us every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern for the Mind Behind Leadership, where we focus on what leadership really means to us and to others. We have practical discussions with the CEOs of some of the world's largest companies, owners of small businesses, and experts in psychology and behavior to get that inside track, what to do, what to avoid, and what really happens. Join me, Graham Dobbin, at the new time, 4 p.m. every Tuesday for the Mind Behind Leadership, here live on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hey, this is Joseph Franklin McElroy back with the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast, and my guest Hussein Ebied. So, Hussein, so it sounds like, and I agree with you because I'm doing the same thing, which is that the handoff between the strategist and the copywriter is really is more than just keywords now. It's a real creative brief, right?
Right.
And what do you think about these AI programs out there like Demand Jump or Surfer SEO or even Bright Edge, are sort of trying to create these creative briefs? Do you think working with those is a good idea, or do you think they're not quite there yet? Or will they replace the strategists?
I think that no matter what, there will always be the need and the requirement for the human element, the human strategy, the human thinking. So, I've used tools like Bright Edge and things like that, but for content, I think the closest thing I've had in terms of experience with an AI tool that develops content is something called WordPress, which is a tool that's created by a company called Automated Insights.
Mm-hmm.
What I learned working with that tool is, well, first of all, what that tool does is if you have, say, 1,000 cities where you have hotels in.
What's the name of the tool? It's not WordPress. That's the.
I'm sorry, not WordPress. Wordsmith.
Wordsmith. Okay.
Thank you. Wordsmith. So the way it works is if you have like thousands or tens of thousands of either locations you need to write about, hotels, products, if you're in a retail client, and you have structured data about each one, like the price. For destinations, it might be the points of interest in that destination, the temperature or the weather of that destination at certain times of year. If you have that data structured, you can essentially develop what's called a template. And what that template will do is a strategist has to build it and put it together, and it's based on a ton of Boolean operators, and you can make it as complex as possible. It all depends on your familiarity and your expertise using this tool. But using real data and using a really good template could technically generate tens of thousands of pieces of content, overnight. I think that stuff like that can be very successful, but you can't do it without a really smart strategist developing that template. It's like, yes, you don't want to just get content for the sake of content, but it's almost like, what are the data points and the narratives that you're going to associate with those data points that your readers are going to find truly interesting?
Well, the thing I also want to point out to people also is that most of these AI programs, exploit a niche in a moment, right?
Right.
The problem is they all have to use Google, and and they oftentimes use even Google's code, their G3 or GPT platforms, things like that, the machine learning, the data they get from Google. And if you think about it, Google has a business model that is probably the greatest AI out there, right?
Right.
And if and this has always been the case with SEOs and why link building and all these things that people promise will make SEO work, is if you can constantly and accurately game the Google's system to always get high ratings for your content and win the game, just by some programmatic approach, then Google's out of business, right? Because everybody would know that all those results are false there, and nobody would trust the results. It would destroy their business model. So they are always going to change the game. And if you're building upon their code and their source, they're going to know what the heck
they're going to know what you're doing. The good thing is, like, recently, I think Google put out a statement that if you're doing automated content generation, but it's actually delivering value, and it's not just generating fluff, they're okay with that. Like when you think about the stock market and the financial industry, they're using a lot of these tools now to put out like short articles where it's not just how much did the stock go up or down, but other pros and narrative in relation to the stock based on structured data. Google recently said they're okay with that because it's delivering value.
I think there'll be I think definitely the case for generating is when it's a factual based information you just want to give out there, right? That is sort of the top of the funnel content, right? To help educate people on the space. Yeah, I think that should be, or all the restaurants and all the important things in the area around your tourism site, things like that. Yeah. AI is going to dominate that. And if you're writing that kind of content now, your future in doing that by hand is probably limited. But, getting into the emotional stuff and the interesting stories and all the things that go into eventually converting somebody into client, that stuff is not going to be AI driven, because it's not, AI driven content will just be reproducing stuff. And there's only really, space for writing content that, might talk about somebody's individual experience with, climbing a mountain. It'll be the same thing all the time, and it's not really adding value. Right.
You're absolutely right. In fact, I remember speaking to one of the executives at Automated Insights about this, and I said, are you guys putting like writers out of work by developing this type of technology? And they said, very similar to what you just said, they said, no, in fact, what we're doing is by saving hundreds of hours of writers time in creating these like sort of factual based pieces, they're not necessarily leaving their jobs. No, they actually have time now to develop the longer form interest pieces that require a real human touch to create engaging content. So they get to work on the stuff they enjoy working on, because now we have a machine that's generating the stuff that is valuable, but doesn't require necessarily a great human writer to produce.
Cool. Well, we're getting close to the end here. I'd like to give you the opportunity to promote any content that you might want people to read, or your site.
Yes.
Or how they would reach out to you. So let it go.
Thank you. Yes. So, Sunnyside Digital, it's still, relatively in its infancy. We're growing fast though, but we are trying to catch up with our marketing. So we do have a website, sunnysidemarketing.com. But probably the best thing for us right now is if you reach out to me on LinkedIn. Again, my name is Hussein Ebied. There you'll find a bunch of pieces that I've published about some of the topics that Joseph and I spoke about today, from experience optimization, replacing SEO, to what to do about voice search, and topics such as those as well. I just wanted to actually, I don't want to spend the rest of my time sort of just promoting myself. I actually want to thank you, Joseph, for inviting me to your show. You're putting out great materials, great content, and I really do hope that, your audiences grow, because there's some really amazing, valuable information that you're putting out there in the world. So thank you. I'm honored for being a guest on today's show.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure knowing you, working with you, and now having a guest on my podcast. And I look forward to other opportunities to interact with you in the future. This is the Wise Content Creates Wealth podcast. You can find out more about us at wisecontentcreateswealth.com, and also on our Facebook page where this streams live, which is facebook.com/wisecontentcreateswealth. This is also broadcast live as we're doing it on talkradio.nyc network, which has a lot of live shows every day, podcasts that you can listen to that range from self-help to small business to travel. I actually have another podcast called Gateway to the Smokies podcast. It's on Tuesdays from 6 to 7 that talks about the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina, and also about I have a motel resort, which is sort of a motel, classic road motel with country inn amenities. But we talked to a lot of great people in that space about what's happening in the Smokies and how to enjoy it. So reach out to there. But there's lots of shows on this network, talkradio.nyc. My company is Galileo Tech Media.com, and we are consultants on developing content that works in SEO and content marketing, especially in travel and real estate. So look us up at GalileoTechMedia.com. And I appreciate everybody here listening to us. And it's the same time every week, Fridays from noon until 1. And I look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye, everyone.